Hey guys, thanks for tuning in for a special emergency episode of the show. This episode will be a bit different than most. It's regarding the Save Our Stages Act that is being lobbied for in Congress. It's a congressional act that would provide financial stimulus to independent venues around the country that have been forcibly closed due to coronavirus in the name of public health. The act is being lobbied for by a newly formed organization called the National Independent Venue Association, or NIVA. This is a group of performing arts businesses all over the country bonding together to ask for help. I have on the program today the head of NIVA, Miss Dana Frank, who also happens to be the owner and CEO of First Avenue in Minneapolis, one of the absolute crown jewels of music venues in our country. She's going to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID has had on the arts and entertainment sector, also what the Save Our Stages Act is advocating for, and finally, how you as a music lover or a songwriter yourself or a musician can help this particular cause. So thanks for listening, and thanks for helping out where you can. Dana Frank, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. Would you give our listeners a just kind of a brief history of your career in music and also a brief history of First Avenue in Minneapolis?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is awesome. I am the current owner CEO of First Avenue. First Avenue began as the Depot in 1970, April 3rd, 1970, with a show by Joe Cocker. It was a converted Greyhound bus station. And it went through a few different iterations as a discotheque called Uncle Sam's, and then it was renamed into Just Sam's, and then it became First Avenue 1979 or 80. I should probably know this better. And it's been operating as First Avenue since that era.
Gotcha. And I always tell, anytime anyone asks me what the best club in America is, I say you can flip a coin and it's either the 930 Club or it's First Avenue. I grew up outside of D.C., so sometimes I have to come down on the side of the 930 Club. Needless to say, I love your club. Can you talk a little bit about the culture of your club and what makes it such a special place to be at and see shows?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a podcast, so you can't see the giant grin I have on my face, but we pride ourselves on being an artist-friendly environment, or artist-first, really creative, really experimental. I like to think of us as a yes company. So, you want to do that? Yes, let's try it. Like, you want to put on that crazy stage performance? Absolutely. We'll do whatever we can to help you make that happen. In Minnesota, it's cold in the winter. We have a lot of, dark Fridays and Saturdays where we'll just throw things at the wall and be like, maybe this event will work, maybe that event will work. And so, we like to be experimental, again, like all different types of music, and really accommodating, and really music first and customer first.
It really comes across that way. And then really crew first as well. I mean, every time I come to play a show at either, the small room at First Ave or your other club in St. Paul, it's always the same people working at the club. I mean, Conrad, your stage manager, has been there for, 20 or 30 years. What's your philosophy as far as the people that work at your club?
Oh, absolutely. So Conrad celebrated his 30th anniversary. We have bartenders who actually have been there for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
We have a calendar runner who was a DJ in the late 70s, early 80s, was one of the ones that played Prince's early music. He's been working for us for 40 plus years. Minnesota as a state is one that's really hard to leave. And so, and the company itself and the work, it's really fun, and we treat people well, and, we're honest and transparent. And I think people, it makes it hard to leave. We have, some bartenders and some employees who get day jobs and move on, and they still keep a shift a week or a shift every other week. It's hard to leave.
That's really cool. You mentioned his name. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what exactly was Prince's involvement with First Avenue?
He played at the club a lot in the late 70s, early 80s. He never owned it. That is a misconception. But he It's where he would give his records to the DJs and see how people responded to it. He would kind of stand by the DJs as they played and watched if people danced and, if they took breaks at that time, and where he played some of his earliest performances to experiment with his sound, try out new band members, etc.
Wow, that is rad. And yeah, I did think that he owned it for a while, so we learned something new every day at the Working Songwriter
I know
podcast.
People are always so disappointed when they meet me and I'm like, I'm the owner of First Avenue, or I should say they used to be, and like, I thought it was Prince. I'm like, sorry, that's me.
Fair enough. Well, we're glad that you're the owner of First Avenue because it's been such a great institution. And speaking of that, can you talk about, we're going to talk about COVID here. Talk to me about the first days of when COVID was coming down and how you guys had to alter operations in March when this was first coming down the pike.
Oh, it's so much more fun talking about Prince.
I know.
So we started tracking coronavirus, I would say mid-February. I have some friends in China, and we were kind of watching what they were going through and get kind of preparing as much as we can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And encouraging people to wash their hands and stay home from work. And, the times when we thought like just elbow bumping instead of shaking hands would cure it all, we were doing all of that. And then, the dominoes started to fall really the week of March 8th. Mm-hmm. Just remembering like Seattle put their gathering ban into effect, and then DC. And then on Friday, March 13th, it became really clear that it wasn't safe to hold events, and that you couldn't really be a responsible business owner and still have hundreds of people packed into a room. And so we, on 3 hours notice, we had a band loaded into the Fine Line. We had bands loaded and everything for the Turf Club too. And we kept waiting for the governor to make the announcement and, waiting. And finally it just became, let's just call it off. And, we thought maybe it would be a couple weeks. We were like, oh, maybe we'll get open by our 50th anniversary on April 3rd. We met the day after the management team met, March 14th, Saturday. They're like, okay, here's our 2-week plan. And if we're still closed May 1, here's what our plan will be. And if we're still closed June 1, like, well, that'll never happen. And then by Monday, it was kind of all plans off the table. And we began to realize that we were going to be closed for a very, very long time. I still don't think that anyone really anticipated being closed into the fall, because that's our touring season, right? Like that's where every one who relies on live music to pay their bills makes all their money for the year. And so we were kind of like, oh, losing summer is brutal, it's awful, but we'll still have the fall. And then the fall started going down, and it became like the real panic situation that we have now.
Indeed. Who is this affecting the most in your organization? Is it hitting everybody in the same way? Is it tougher for your staff members? Is it tougher for the people booking the shows? Who do you think this is putting particular challenges on right now?
Oh, I can't think of anyone that it's not putting a challenge on. I mean, from our local artists that rely on live shows to pay their bills, to the touring crews. A lot of our friends are maybe they aren't technically employed by First Avenue, but they're tour managers or sound crew or, just that rely on touring. They're completely unemployed. They're, relying on PUA. All of our staff, obviously, that we had to let go the worst day in any business person's life. We had to let go about 450 people at one time. It was just, it's just devastating. And the few people that we have still working, it's incredibly hard because to some degree, I guess in any degree, it's busier now than it ever has been. Just because we're not putting on music doesn't mean there's no operations. We're still rescheduling shows. We're still marketing. We're still trying to generate revenue either by, some live stream partnerships or merchandise or just brainstorming and trying to think of new ideas. Mm-hmm. There's still building maintenance. We had leaky pipe. There are still things to do, and we're, down to like a really skilled crew. And so everyone's kind of having to pick up the slack.
Boy. Can you talk to me a little bit now? So obviously you're here because you own one of the you own and run one of the premier clubs in America, independent clubs in America, and that would be enough to have you on our program. But the thing that really sealed the deal and why we really want to talk to you right now is you are spearheading, you are, I believe, the head of this lobbying organization called the National Independent Venue Association. Can you tell us exactly what that is?
Yeah, so NEVA, we call it, came out of town halls led by Marauder Group and Independent Venue Week. It was that same week that everything started going down. Maybe 80 to 100 venue operators and owners got on the phone and started just talking about what they were seeing and what they were doing. And it was just so incredibly helpful to, be able to commiserate and generate ideas from other people going through the same thing, because it's so unprecedented. You can't really look to mentors or business leaders or anyone for advice these days. You have to figure it out. And so at the end of the call, it moved from calls to Zoom, and it became pretty clear on these Zooms that a number of members or a number of folks weren't quite anticipating the length of time that we might be down. A lot of times the conversation started gearing towards, well, what, I think we'll be open May 15th or May 20th, and I'd be like, oh God, oh no. And so there was a few of us who were like, oh, we should have an organization, like a trade association, like other industries have, because the industry as a whole is going to need serious governmental help, because I like to remind everybody, like, this isn't our fault. Like, our industry is strong. Our industry was thriving. And by everyone's expectations, 2020 was going to be the year. Yeah. Like, our ticket counts and ticket show counts and everything was like, looking so good. And a lot of people have made serious investments, and, it's not like COVID exposed a flaw in our industry. It's like literally there's just a disease where people can't gather, and we are gathering spaces.
Yes.
And so, again, I don't even like to call it a bailout because, the banks were bailed out by a crisis of their own making. Like, we did nothing wrong. Right. We did everything right. And so, the government shut us down to protect public health, and it's the government's responsibility to make sure that we can open our doors again.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as in the same way that if you burned your own house down, it's on you to build it again. But if the government comes through and says, listen, we need your property because we're building a freeway through here, they have to pay you for that freeway going through your house. And in the same way, COVID is this thing where we can't have people getting together in large numbers. We particularly can't have them getting together in large numbers for entertainment. And so, I think as a society, it does make sense to pour resources towards a business where we've just built a freeway through their front yard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Senator Rubio called it a taking. This is a taking. They took our business, of which we totally agree. It's not safe. We cannot operate. But at the same time, since you took it due to public health, you just need to make sure we can open our doors again.
So what specifically are you lobbying for from Capitol Hill right now?
We're lobbying for a bill called the Save Our Stages Act that I'm so proud is being led by my own Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota and Senator John Cornyn from Texas. And so it's truly bipartisan because music is universal. And so we've had great conversations and equal support from both sides of the aisle, which we're pretty excited about. And it would be a grant program to pay necessary operating expenses until such a time when it's safe to open. So it really is the bare minimum: rent, payroll, insurance, utilities, to make sure that people that have supported their communities and been on their blocks for 20, 30 years, who made it through 9/11, who made it through 2008 economic crisis, that have withstood every single crisis, are now like raising their hands and saying, I can't make it. And so we just have to do something to help.
Got it. So it would be to cover basic operating costs. Will there be like tax break situations in there? Are you guys still on the hook for taxes with the state and the feds?
Yeah, I mean, so we do have a tax bill also, because our industry is so distressed. You have to laugh. Not only do we have no revenue, we're refunding, hundreds of thousands of tickets.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
It's like somebody took a vacuum to our bank account, and we're negative revenue in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for even small clubs. And so we have a bill that would give us moderate tax credit for the refunded tickets. And then the grant bill is called Save Our Stages bill. And then there's also an act called Restart that is industry agnostic. It's kind of like a alternative to PPP, which doesn't work for our industry at all, that gives loan forgiveness based on a loss of revenue.
Gotcha. And so
it was just really frustrating to us to see equal priority given to businesses that were fine versus businesses that were completely shut down. And it feels like America's resources should be prioritized to those of us that are, extremely distressed right now and can't acclimate.
Yeah, I mean, when this first came down the pike for everybody, I'm sure politicians included, you just had to throw a blunt force instrument at this thing. And so hopefully as this goes on, it can be a little bit more fine-tuned and money can kind of flow to where it needs to.
Yeah, and then on top of that, we're also advocating for extension of PUA and unemployment benefits, because we understand that, our whole ecosystem is hurting right now, and we all want to be able to see a show one day and hope that the industry as a whole can survive it.
And I'm sorry, is PUA different than unemployment?
Well, it's pandemic unemployment. So
pandemic. Okay, got it.
It's like the extra $600 a week, but then it also allows 1099 freelancers to access it. So it's specific for COVID.
Got it. And so you mentioned that your particular rep for this is Amy Klobuchar, the Char, as I called her during primary season. I like the Char.
Awesome.
You go with her and John Cornyn. Are you guys just lobbying them? Are you sending people to Washington to do this, or are you doing this remotely? How exactly are you implementing this pressure? Are you going to go testify to Congress?
So NEVA, the membership of NEVA just grew so exponentially fast. We actually have members in 95% of congressional districts.
Wow.
And so we are having constituents email their own representatives. So it's like me in Minnesota, like I'm not really talking to reps in California or Kansas. We have venues and promoters that are reaching out directly. And people are always kind of surprised about that, we're not like a big city or a really like urban organization. And it's been a really interesting experience to explain, like, no, the arts are everywhere. Even in suburban or rural, there's art centers, there's concert series, there's, free pavilions. Music is completely universal, and it spreads throughout the entire country.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think
so
over the last 10 years, I've definitely played in all 95% of those congressional districts.
Perfect. So you could call everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So our listeners to this show are generally musicians, aspiring musicians, and the people who love the work of songwriters. What can they do to support NEVA? Besides calling their congressmen to ask for the Save Our Stages Act, can they contribute to NEVA? What ways can they be most helpful to you?
Yeah, we do have a donate button on our website. It's NIVASSOC.org. We are, though, encouraging people to donate to their venues. I mean, just know that every venue is hurting, every promoter, everyone's without revenue. There's like maybe 2 or 3 across the country I've talked to who either, have some kind of alternate resources or are doing drive-in shows and really making them work. But, just maybe reach out and ask the venues directly what you can do to help. If there's a social media presence, post on your socials, try to spread the word. We're in the last week. Hopefully by Friday, the sides will be able to agree on a deal. I'm kind of losing hope every day, but that's the hope, at least.
So what you're saying is all venues are in trouble except for the couple of venues that are just fronts for laundering cocaine money.
I did not say that.
You did not say that. I will make clear to our listeners. And I'll cut that out later if you want me to. I had to be a smart ass.
Some are in various stages of distress. I'm not saying, the survey, the anonymous survey we had said 90% did not have the cash to withstand the pandemic. And so knowing that even if they're not going to close tomorrow, they're still hurting. It's still hard.
Gotcha.
Just like it is on songwriters and everybody involved in the live industry.
Yeah, but songwriters and creators have an ability to, well, first of all, they have an ability to continue to monetize in different ways with live streams and stuff. And also, look, my costs as a songwriter are a lot less than your cost as First Avenue. You know what I mean? Like there's a much lower floor. So there is a little bit of a difference there. One last question, and I don't mean to be divisive here in some way, but I would have to ask, does this, with huge corporations like Live Nation, who have a system of clubs throughout America, are they a part of this Independent Venue Association as well, or are they a different corporate entity?
They're a different corporate entity. So our qualifications for membership are you can't be publicly owned, you can't be multinational, and you can't operate venues in more than 10 states.
Got it. Okay. Right on. And our philosophy there is they have access to capital. They just have so many more resources. They're better collateralized. They have, ancillary revenue streams. Like as independent venues, gather people around the love of music is what we do. It's all we do. And we don't have access to the resources that they do. So we need our own lobbying effort. Amen to that. Well, I will thank you on behalf of all musicians who have played your clubs and the other clubs in this association. And thanks so much for taking the time to talk with the Working Songwriter Podcast.
Thanks so much. We can't wait to have you back when this BS is over.
So there you have it. You can head over to saveourstages.com. There's a form to fill out right there to send to your representatives in Congress. They make it very easy for you. It takes 5 seconds. Head over there to do it and tell your representatives that you'd like to help to save our stages. Thanks to Dana Frank, and I'll see you later this week for a regular episode.